Define woman. Go, please. It's one of you.
Imagine someone that had spent, a scholar, spent his entire life trying to figure out what it is that makes beautiful things beautiful. And he looked at Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, he looked at Rembrandt's portraits, he looked at the Sistine Chapel, he looked at a number of things, and racked his brain for a whole career, 20, 30, 40 years, trying to figure out some quality that all these things have in common. And the difficulty may be in the kind of question that we're asking. They may not have anything intrinsically in common that unites all of them. There may be a series of overlapping commonalities that allow us to refer to all these things in a rough and approximate way. It doesn't give us ultimate Platonic precision. It won't turn us into logic machines. But the demand for final logical precision may be the problem here rather than the fuzziness of our language. It may be that we're making impossible and unreasonable demands when we ask for the form of the chair, for the essential quality of every chair and only chairs. Perhaps what we need is a series of examples that work in a rough, practical way in the language games that we live with. In other words, the fact that I can't specify for you some quality that every game has and only games have doesn't mean that you don't know what I'm talking about when I use the word game, and doesn't mean I can't teach it to Johnny. And what more do you want to do with it? Aren't we asking the impossible? Is a fuzzy photograph a photograph? Well, yeah. Is it adequate for certain purposes? Well, it depends on what purposes you want to do, you want it for. In other words, is a fuzzy definition a definition? Well, Plato would say no. Why? Because he wants absolute certainty. That's what the Greek tradition is all about. Wittgenstein says the problem is not with our language, the problem is not with our thinking, the problem is with the demand for absolute certainty about the nature of chairness. There is no such thing. There's just this chair and the other chair, and there's an intrinsic ambiguity built into our definitions along those lines that's exactly like the ambiguity that we find in a fuzzy photograph. Think of a satellite's photograph of the United States. You might object that it's not clear that your backyard is there. Wittgenstein would say, well, if we need more resolution, we can add that resolution as it's necessary in the language games we are engaged in. But insofar as we just want a satellite's photo of the United States, this does just fine. If you want your backyard, I suppose we could clarify it somewhat. And insofar as our language games demand that we bring it down to the level of the backyard, that we increase the specificity, we can always add that as we need it. But we don't need a priori an ultimate essential definition of all the words in our language prior to being able to talk. Talk comes first. Action comes first. These logical systemizations of it come second, and insofar as they create a nonsensical ambiguity in our understanding of ourselves and our world, the fault lies not with the world, the fault lies not with our language, the fault lies with an unreasonable demand for unreasonable degrees of certainty.